Hi, I'm Neil, and I'm continuing to share a little bit about language learning. So I just, in this video, just want to um, talk very, very briefly about language levels. So, how do you know um, to tell people or to find material to look at what your language level is? In the early 1990s, late 1980s, early 1990s, the Council of Europe developed a scale of language levels, which would go through all the different languages in Europe, and actually it's used outside Europe as well. It's called the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages. It's a six-level scale, and the levels are A, B, C. So it's A1 and A2 are the lowest levels, the beginner levels. B1 and B2 are the intermediate levels. This is where somebody can be more functioning with more or less errors at more of an independent stage and able to take more responsibility for their own language learning. And then you have the more advanced stage, which is the level C. There's level C1 and level C2. So, for example, if you're talking about English, foreign students who come to British universities will be expected to attain a level C1 certificate before they start their university course. That's for the majority of British universities, for example, and also there are other countries that use the same requirements. C1. And then C2 is the highest, considered the highest level. And there are a few places as well. If you want to do a master's or a PhD, then they would probably expect that you be at that level of English. But these exact same levels exist in Portuguese, levels A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. Exactly the same in Spanish, in Italian, in German, in Welsh even, in French. Every language basically has a table of what a person can do at these different stages. So what a person can do at level A1, what they can do at level A2, and what they can do at level B1 and level B2, C1, and C2, so on and forth. I'm not going to go into those in detail here. I don't want this to be too long. I'll share a link in the comments below where you can actually just jump to the Council of Europe website and find out that information and find the descriptors to say what are those different levels of the language you speak. So if you have studied French, German, or Spanish at school, particularly in the UK, you may find that after a couple of years of learning, you may be around the A1 and A2 stage, which means you can probably figure out a few basic things. You can repeat some basic phrases that you've learned about explaining who you are, like saying what your name is, how old you are, where you come from, if you have brothers and sisters, what your job is maybe. But it's very much phrases and ideas that you've learned. And you'll say that with a lot of mistakes. So you won't say, last week I went shopping in Cardiff. You'd say, last week I go Cardiff shop. So you communicate a basic idea, but you're not going to be grammatically perfect. And that's fine. I mean, when you're learning a language, you don't have to be perfect. And immediately within the first day, really, you start learning a language, you should be able to learn a couple of things that you'll be able to say imperfectly where you're starting to communicate. And they say, my name is, so then they get the verb, and they say, they repeat the whole phrase better, and they say their name. And then you get them to ask you. And then they ask you. I say, my name is, and then you get them to ask each other. So within the first class, these kids are going home asking about what's your name, answering what's your name, understanding it, and we haven't touched on grammar. We haven't broken it down into what the words mean. How would you change it if you were talking to somebody else? They just go home knowing that they can do the basic of the basic, and they learned that in the first hour that they ever had any contact with a language. And then it's funny, actually, some of those who were 7 or 8-year-olds are now in their 40s and 50s. And some of them are using English as their own language at very, very high levels. I remember one of my students who did his PhD in engineering. He did the whole thing in English. He wrote his whole thesis in English. And I've seen that again and again and again. So it is completely possible to start at an extremely basic level, and through practice, you take on this hobby of I'm going to be proficient in the language in the next few years. By the time I go on holidays to Spain, I want to be able to at least understand a few things, or maybe have a very, very, very basic conversation with somebody on my holiday. And then, maybe the next year I go again, or if you're going to France and doing the same. Go and do some shopping, learn some basic words. So those are the basic level skills of level A1 and A2. When you take a class, what they very often will do in the class is they'll split those levels up again. So it will be level A1.1, level A1.2, level A2.1, and level A2.2. So if you're learning a much more difficult language, let's say you're learning Arabic or Thai or Chinese or Korean or something, you might spend a lot more time at the level of A1 and A2. At the level B, which is the independent learner, B1, you can go on holidays. And you can ask for basic directions. You can give a little bit of information about yourself. You can ask a little bit of information about the other person. It's still very stunted, but you're getting there. You get the idea that you can communicate on quite a basic level. And I would say that when I'm trying to communicate in Spanish, I would say that somewhere around where my Spanish level would be about a level B1. In terms of what I can speak. In terms of what I can understand, I would put that at a higher level. And that's the other thing about these different levels. You can be at one level in what you speak, but you can be in a higher level, for example, of what you understand. Level B2 is around about a level where still you're not perfect by any means, but you can work in an English-speaking context, and you can communicate work things. You can deal with situations that come up that maybe you're not familiar with, whereas previously it will be more language and situations you are familiar with. And at level B2, then it will be, you'll be able to hold a conversation about a lot of things. It's very satisfying to be able to be at level B2. But it's still very imperfect. So you have to be comfortable with being imperfect and still not worrying too much about making mistakes with grammar. That's even the case with people who are native speakers of a language. They're not perfect in the way that they speak. So those are the four, I think, levels to think about. Attaining a level C1 or a level C2 takes a lot of time. You're talking about 10 years or more, probably, to be able to get there, and a lot of dedication and a lot of more sophisticated understanding of how languages work. But you can get through level A1 completely on your own, completely without any classes at all, and probably through A2 as well. There's a lot that you can do to get yourself through those two levels without having to worry about taking an actual class. And as I said previously, and I think in the last video that I did, taking a class is not something that you have to do to learn a language. A lot of people do it, but a lot of people give up because immediately they have to do grammar and they're learning a lot of vocabulary that maybe they don't need. Then they're going through a book or a syllabus which doesn't really meet their needs. And you're thinking, if you remember back in school when, if you're learning a language and they give you these translation exercises to do, and you think, when am I ever going to say some of those things? And so you can learn a lot of natural language through listening and surrounding yourself with that language, which is very, very, very easy now and again with the internet and even with Netflix. With Netflix, there's a lot of things that you can put on where you're watching in English and you're looking at the subtitles in the other language. And there are a lot of things that you can put it in the original language. You can put it in the original language with English subtitles. Then you can get to the point where, well, I generally tell people, if you know the story, if you've seen The Lion King, put The Lion King on in Spanish or in German or in Portuguese or in Italian or whatever else you want. There's many, many languages that you can find it in. Turn the subtitles off and listen to the whole thing in the other language, and you're not missing the story because you've seen the story before in English. So there's nothing that you're missing, but you're getting used to the sounds, and it becomes more familiar to you. You start to separate where everything is jumbled together, where you start to pick out specific words. And so that's what I would encourage people to do, particularly at this level A1 and level A2. I just finished off, I would encourage you to go onto the Council of Europe website and look into more detail about what these levels mean and what you might be able to do when you reach those levels, which will help you to decide what goal you want and how long you want to spend taking that goal. And then to finish off, substituting classes for other things, there are a lot of help. There's a lot of help online. There's a lot of YouTube with most languages that you would be interested in learning, where you find somebody who is teaching the language through YouTube. So you wouldn't even need to worry about finding a local class. If you do want to find a local class, there are some. I know where I live here in the Caerphilly area, sometimes you can find groups of people that get together to learn a language. But again, whatever fits you. So thank you for listening.